Good evening, all. Thank you so much for coming along. It's I'm not sure if we always have this sort of a roll up for a council budget meeting, but it shows what engaged citizens we are here in Armidale. We're really keen, and when I say thank you for coming along, I really and truly mean that, because it's important that we as a council and a group of councillors have the opportunity to have a grown-up conversation with you, the community. So, you know, the journey that Armidale Regional Council has been on for the past 25 years has been somewhat rocky, and we need to turn that around. And so to do that, it does mean some hard conversations. Now, the hard conversations really aren't the 22-23 budget that we're going to be talking about, but there are some items in the forward projections which are what I assume has filled the room. So we will get to that. I'm thrilled that a bunch of my fellow councillors have been able to join us as well, some members of the executive too. A handful of councillors haven't been able to make it with very legitimate reasons, and they do send their genuine apologies. So let's get underway. What I want to talk to you about are the various plans that we have in place here on council, and I also then want to lead that into that lends itself to a discussion as to, you know, where are we now and how did we get here? And then the next step, obviously, is where do we want to go, and what does that really mean? So that's the big picture of what we're going to happen upon this evening. So first up, of the plans that we have, the first one is our community plan. Now, the community plan articulates the aspirations of the community. So mid to late last year, there was a very broad consultation process. Some of you may have chosen to be part of that, where we went out and we just sought feedback from the community as to what you want your region to look like in 2032. And the answers were quite instructive, and they're deliberately instructive. They're what you have told us as a council you would like us to achieve. So there are 5 key things that came out of that. The first one was you want this region to be economically robust. And having had a look at the performance of this region for the past 25 years, I can see why that's a key driver. The second thing that came in was for this region to be environmentally sustainable. The third one was to be led by good governance, or led through good governance. And I suspect that's probably a little bit Armidale region centric, and I understand. And I think, you know, today we're certainly showing our hand there. The fourth one was a strong tourism sector, and the final one was a cohesive community. So they're the things that the community have told us they want. They want this region to grow primarily. So from that, we have developed a delivery program. Now, there are copies of these programs out there, out on the table. If you weren't able to get hold of them, they can be downloaded. If you aren't able to download them, if you mosey on into the to the council building, we can provide you with some hard copies there. So we have the delivery program, which sets out what council will deliver to achieve these goals that have been set out in the community plan. We have a resourcing strategy. I bumped something. We have a resourcing strategy that outlines the financial, human and other resources necessary to deliver on that plan. And finally, we have a 1-year operational plan. So that sets out the individual projects and activities that council are going to take in the upcoming financial year. Now, the operational plan also includes a budget, a revenue policy, fees and charges, etc., etc. So they're the big picture things. So let's talk about where we're at now and how we got here. Now, there's you know, well, everything has history really, but back in 2016, you've got very touchy. Back in 2016, or someone wants me to hurry up and finish. Back in 2016, there was the merger. Now that merger, and it's been talked about around, it was effectively cobbling together 2 donkeys to try and make a racehorse. There was a fit to the future done for both Armidale and Guyra, and things weren't terribly rosy. So the merger happened, but going way back when, there's been a systemic revenue problem going back decades in both councils. Now the question probably has to be, if I was sitting in your shoes, why is this only being addressed now? So, probably many answers for this. When we talk about, I'll just jump forward a slide, and we can talk about some budget structural issues. What we have at the moment, and this pie graph here, we have a recurrent $7 million shortfall in our asset maintenance. So that has been solved previously by ignoring it and not maintaining those assets. Now that's in both Armidale and Guyra. So consequently, we've seen this rundown, our assets and the quality of our assets and the condition of our assets have been diminished. We're also projecting for this year that we will actually go into an operational deficit of $3 million in order to grow. So I'll circle back to that. But when I talk about, how did we get there? What are the problems? And there being a revenue thing, I would say that in some cases, going back decades, and previous councils in both Armidale and Guyra, maybe the councillors weren't provided with the information that's relevant. Or perhaps both organisations underestimated or ignored the real cost of maintaining their assets, particularly the road network. So we have over 1,000 kilometres of dirt road. And sometime in the last 25 years, probably the councils in both Armidale and Guyra missed that opportunity to set their rates appropriately. If that decision had been made ages ago to set rates at an appropriate benchmark, then we could just have the incremental increases. But what's happened is that the accumulation of an underinvestment has meant that our assets have deteriorated further and our rates just haven't kept pace with what needs to happen.
Sam, can I just bring something in there? Ever since 2000, there have been a number of external examinations of the ADC and I think later to the ARC financial position, and every one of those external investigations said that the ADC in particular was spending too much on services and not enough on maintaining and improving infrastructure, especially in rural.
Can you repeat that comment? I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, what we'll do is, it's probably better, let's do questions after. We've got an hour and, well, we can stay here until everyone's puffed.
Your comment about why.
Oh, okay.
Reasons for the
Thank you. Look, the reasons are going to be many and varied. And I think whilst it's useful to understand, and this probably is the adult conversation, whilst it's useful to understand why, we're never going to understand all of the reasons, but now what we need to do is decide what are we going to do. And this really is the adult conversation. Are we going to make some changes or are we going to bat on? So with this multi-million-dollar shortfall, we have this huge backlog and it's swamping us. It also means that we don't have the funds to grow. So, council, we can't invest in our region. We've got limited assets there. The other thing, and this is really important, and something that I've heard, for a number of months, both before I came onto council and since I've been on council, and that is, well, why doesn't council just get grant writers? There are heaps of grants out there. Go and get grants, get grants, get grants. The reality is, we can't access many of the grants because most grants require co-contributions. So you've actually got to be able to put your own money in. And the reason for that, I suspect, is that co-contributions are a vetting process. Governments want to back a winner. And if you can't pony up some money, or at least a little bit of it, you've sort of counted yourself out. You're not a winner. So you're not bankable. They're going to give money to regions can actually pitch in themselves and help themselves. So we've missed out there, and as a result, both Armidale and Guyra historically have just lived on scraps. We've got the bare minimum. Governments have probably been given us money because it'd be too embarrassing not to give us the money. So that's not a mature region. So all of these problems, we need to address them now. We really can't continue to kick this can down the road any further. And whilst I'm on that road analogy, we really are at a fork in the road. So taken to the extreme, council has two fairly broad options. We can either manage the decline, so continue on our current trajectory, but do that in a graceful way. So try and touch the plane down on water rather than hit the side of the cliff. The other one is to grow our way out. So managing the decline is going to see the most vulnerable in our community suffer the most, because they're the ones that access a lot of our services. So it says a lot about us as a region if we decide to decline. So I see growth as our only option, and really is the one at the top of the list. So this slide here tells the stark reality of our region. So what we're measuring here is gross regional product, and it's primarily geared around jobs. So it's driven by jobs. So what you're looking at here, and this is when we compare ourselves to other similar councils. So this slide here was done up by a former chief economist of Westpac. He either deliberately or foolishly didn't include Tamworth, but it follows a similar trajectory to Toowoomba, which is the blue, which is growth. Other ones that we have here are Wagga, Ballarat, Bendigo, Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie. And here's poor old Armidale. For 20 years have flatlined. What we've produced as a region has flatlined. It's probably been the same going back another 10 years. So this is why the first action of this council, was to commit to growing jobs, an additional 4,000 jobs by 2040. So that should equate to about 10,000 additional people in our region. And that's what we need. We need that to make a lot of what we perceive as problems disappear. So a lot of what we perceive to be problems really are symptoms of a low population. So we really need to get our economy up. So whether that's we need to get our population up. So whether that's a sluggish economy here, lack of vibrancy, you name it, it's because we're a region of 30,000 people as opposed to a region of 40,000 people. We need to make that change. So it's incumbent on us as a council to really grow it. So how we're going to do it?
Sam, could I just applaud you there?
Yes.
You're being supported by some lovely music, but Luke would just like to turn it off for you so that...
I heard that. I wasn't sure if that was voices in my head.
You know, nothing like being supported by... It sounded like James Blunt or someone like that, but... thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this will make all the difference.
Maybe everyone can hear you now.
So what we need to do as a council is fix things up. We need to get our house in order before we take off. If we're on a growth trajectory and a growth plan, we first of all need to fix up the bedrock, from where we are launching. So thematically, we've labelled this Restore and Thrive. So for the next 2 years, financial year 2022-23 and 23-24, we're going to concentrate on our core activities. That's roads, rates, rubbish, and a little bit of infrastructure renewal. Now, just to come back to this, it means there's, as I mentioned before, the $7 million shortfall in asset maintenance, but we also will have if we're going to try and grow our way out, we need to spend $3 million more than we will have in revenue. Now we can dip into reserves for that for the first year, and that's what our plan is. Is to dip into those reserves. So we can spend some time gearing ourselves up for growth. Years 3 and 4 and beyond really is the growth phase. Now, part of this growth phase is factoring in a special rate variation. So that's the thing that's been bandied about, that we will seek a 50% rate increase. Now, I'll talk to you about that because there's been a lot of misinformation put out there about what it actually means. So we'll address that. So once we can grow in years 3 and 4, there's a few things for that. There's going to be some region building infrastructure is one of the things that we can do. Actually, I better go back to the crawl before we could walk. I often get some very helpful tips and emails. It's great. I think, John, I need a pen and write this down. Sam, why don't you look for efficiencies? Bloody hell, that's clever. So, sure, every organisation could be more efficient. Every home could be more efficient. There is no doubt that there is more that could be done on council in terms of efficiencies. But a fair bit of that work has been done. I'm not saying it's perfect. What I am saying is that it is on our mind. It is something that we are very conscious of. Because efficiencies are, can be a bit nebulous. Find efficiencies. What you're usually meaning is sack some people. So if you sack some people, that's fine if they're not doing any work. So you have to make the assumption or make the call, is the work they're doing non-existent or is the work they're doing not important? So, when it comes to our roads, could we be more efficient, get contractors in? Well, okay, that means letting some people go, but the money that we spent on salaries we now spend on contractors, you're just putting something in a different bucket. So I'm not saying we're perfect, but I am saying we're very, very conscious of it. If you feel the need, send me another email searching for efficiencies and we will hop to it. But just a little bit about where we're at. Now, this is a great graph because we've really stretched a couple of percent to look quite extreme in our favour. So what we're saying here is that the Armidale Council spends around 31% of our revenue on people paying wages and salaries. Others in the northern region spend 34%. Those with a population of less than 70,000 spend 32%. New South Wales average on the whole is 36%. So from a staffing point of view, comparatively, we are pretty good. In terms of full-time equivalents, so the number of people that we employ on our population, a population served by the number per person, we're at 113. Other regional towns and cities are at 107. Again, that graph looks quite extreme, looks like we're twice as good, but we're really 6 people better. We're still better. So that's important. The efficiencies are there. There have been $6.2 million of savings since the merger. So some of that is through operational efficiencies. Some of that is through realising underutilised assets. So there's also a commitment, and it's built into the budget, to find an additional $1 million in savings ongoing. That's not a new $1 million every year, so that in 80 years we would have a cost base of 0. It's to ensure we find those savings or those efficiencies and hang on to them. So this is about that. That's the restore bit. So then we can thrive, then we can take off. So there's some region building infrastructure. Some of you might have heard me talk about that before. So there are some big picture things that we have, in train. There's the water security, and unless we get that, we really can't grow. All I can say is we've been lobbying hard, and I'm confident enough to say we've been lobbying very effectively. So one doesn't want to overpromise too much, but how could I deliver less? So, water security is something that we are really, really focused on there with Malpas Dam, looking at Oakey, etc., etc. We need, to build sufficient secure water supply, not just for our region with another 10,000 people, but for our region well into the future, for a 50,000 plus population. We need to, to fix up our airport. Accessibility there is going to be absolutely vital as well. The other thing that's going to be important, I mentioned before the extra 10,000 people, 4,000 jobs, where are they going to come from? Well, this is sort of what our traditional economic base is. This is where we currently, generate most of our work. Education and training's huge, traditional farming and grazing, and then we have everything else that a regional city should have: health, accommodation, retail trade, etc. Our new ones coming in, and the two that are really obvious to me, are via the renewable energy zone. So there's going to be a bump that comes with the construction phase, but then we need to be clever enough so once everything's built, a solar farm, once it's built, requires a bloke with a chamois and someone with a whippersnipper. So we need to go beyond that. We need to try and build, say, a renewables ecosystem here. If we're the biggest renewable energy zone, we need to get a whole bunch of smart consultants in and just build out from there. I think there's real opportunity there. In the same vein, agriculture technology, that's taking off. The university's a driver in that. We need to see how we can build around there. Intensive horticulture is the other one. We are very unique. We are at the right elevation, and if we have the water, then we can do more of that. So that's probably where we're coming from next step. The other thing that we can start to do once we're up and running and growing is council-led developments. So having defined precincts and really ramping those things up. So housing strategies would be part of it as well. Property acquisitions. The courthouse is something that we hear a lot of. It's an asset to someone. It's sitting there. We all know something better could be done with it. If council were in a sensible financial position, we could acquire it, and then we could start to have that council-led recovery there. But hitherto we can't. We can also invest more in the community. So think about our road network, hydrotherapy pools. Now that comes back to the co-contributions I mentioned before. Be a winner. You get this sort of stuff because you can pitch in. Another one would be the playground down here at Curtis Park there. Tamworth built a $7 million, it's not all about Tamworth and us, but Tamworth built a $7 million park because they can make co-contributions. We had to design a park for less than $1 million because that was a threshold beyond which you had to make co-contributions. So it's not great. We've also got to ensure that we don't, neglect our statutory obligations to keep things maintained. So when we build these sorts of council-led developments and precincts, etc., we also need to be able to maintain them. So that's where we're headed. If we can get our special rate variation through the community first, and then IPART, which is the ultimate determinant of whether it's going to happen or not, then we can actually start to show surpluses. Down the track. Then we can start doing things. We can pay our debts, that would be nice. We can still pay our debts, but we can just pay them with a bit more enthusiasm and confidence. So let's cut to the chase. We need to review our revenue, all of our revenue streams and where things are, how are we going to do this? So it really is a revenue thing. It's not, of course, there are some saving elements, but you can't save your way to success. Not in an organisation the size of what we're running here. And not in a region, you can't save your way to success. So a lot of people have said to me, Sam, you need to treat it like a business. Now, I'm probably economically drier than anyone in the room here. But council isn't a business, it's a service. So if we were to run this as a business, and I were to trim fat, we'd be closing roads. We'd be filling in swimming pools. That's what you do in a business. If something's not making you money, you exit it. So we can't operate that way, or we can. That's the managed decline. But to grow, we're going to have to take on some investment. We're going to have to grow. It's a top-line driven thing. It's a revenue issue. So let's look at currently where our rates come from. 60% of our rates come from residential property. 26% comes from farmland. This is both Armidale and Guyra. And 14% is from business. And, well, it doesn't get a percentage. We'd need quite a few decimal points. There's a small amount of mining. But it's overwhelmingly residential. So in terms of growing our rate base, it's the only thing that we as a council have some degree of control over. There's federal government grants and state government grants, and they're fickle, and they don't allow you to grow. So if we're going to grow, it has to come from all of us. So what we are proposing, and this is probably why the room is full, you want to see what it all means, is a 50% increase to the base rates. But that would be implemented over a 3-year period. So this is the proposition that we're going to go to the community about over the next few months, assuming it gets voted through by council. Okay, so a lot of people said, oh, Sam, your consultation period for this rate rise is very, very short. Well, the consultation period for the rate rise hasn't even started. It's just, everyone's heard about the rate rise, so, or the proposed rate rise, so let's have a chat. So what does it mean? Let's first up look at some of our comparative rates. Where's Armidale, Tamworth, Coffs, Bathurst, Orange, Wagga, and Dubbo. And you can see from a residential point of view, we're not, we're reasonable, we're the smallest of all of them. If we look at business rates, somewhere in the middle. If you look at farmland rates, we're relatively high. Depends on the type of farmland you have, of course, and the average size of the property. So this isn't, a great graph, not because it doesn't support my argument. That's one reason I don't like it. But the other one is, we're talking about average farmland. So you've got very big, very small, where do you sit in the middle? Here's one, I like this one better because it does suit my purposes. Comparative rates, the average ordinary rate per person. You can see we're relatively low. Wouldn't want to be living in Orange. So what does it all mean? Now, a couple of, just before I get on to that, when we talk about a 50% increase in rates, or the special rate variation, what that applies to is the total amount of revenue collected from rates. That is limited. Now, if we have more people in here, we're still only allowed to take this certain dollar amount of rates. If we have more rateable properties, then the rate per property, or the rate per ratepayer, reduces. This is where our low or stagnating population has bitten us. So anyway, just bear that in mind. So what does a 50% rate increase actually look like? I'll talk about Guyra first. Don't know if you can see that up there, but we can bandy this about, and I've put it up on social media as well. A rate rise, a 50% rate rise, if you look at a rates notice, the rate rise only applies to the rateable portion of that. It doesn't apply to the fees and charges. So in this Guyra example, the total rate notice is $1,996. But the rate rise would only apply to the bit in the red. One too far. To the bit in the red, which is, it would only apply to $527 of the 1,996. So it means that the rate increase in total, a 50% increase on this, would only be $263. That's a 13% increase on the overall bill. I'm not dismissing it as small, but I'm just trying to explain what it really means. Now, we're looking at applying that over a 3-year period, so it will step up. Now, in this example here, that would mean an additional $87 each year for 3 years, and then it will cap out and stay at that level. As an Armidale example, same thing. It only applies to this rate base, the rateable portion of the invoice. And so in this case, $957, which would mean the total 50% increase would be $488. So that's an increase of about 18% on what you currently pay in total. And in this example here, that would be an extra $162 per annum, stepping up from there, which is $3.12 per week. So that's what it means. And so I guess when we go out to the community and hasn't, you know, as I said before, there's a few steps to go through. Council has to vote to go and seek the communities, you know, to seek that rate rise, and that may not get through. Assuming it does, we then have to consult widely with the community, and then we have to apply to IPART to get it through. But it's important that everybody knows what it actually means. Because it's pretty easy to say, 50% rate rise, well, we're obviously going to pay 50% more on everything. And that's just not the case. So, no, there's a few more averages in here and it bounces around, but probably the best thing you can do, and I know a few of you in this room have, including me, is get an old rates notice and see what it means for you. Just looking at that bit there. Here's a few more averages. What does it mean for the average Armidale, the average Gyra, business, farmland, etc., etc. So that's really the formal part of the presentation. These documents, there were a handful out there. They're going to be on display, public display till the 8th of June. Then we'll have some council meetings to decide the next steps. We'd like your feedback on the budget stuff. Don't get too worked up about the rates just yet. Just make that a slow simmer. We will be coming back to you in the fullness of time about the rate component for it. So there's plenty of ways you can get in contact with us. Email us, walk in, shout at us, mail us, whatever. All right, let's throw it open to questions. Helen.
Can we just wait for a minute, and if you could just say your name and then your question.
Should have told you at the start, this is being filmed, so if you're going to go feral, it'll end up on social media. I didn't say that because you're there.
I'll try to restrain myself. Yeah, just one thing that I'm not quite clear on. So it's a 50. I'll talk here about the rates rise. What you propose is 50% over 3 years. So am I right in thinking that's something like 17% each year?
No.
No.
No. A third of 17% each year until we get to 17%.
Until you're finally paying that 50% rise.
A third is 50% each year.
Say $87 year one, $170 year two, $200 and whatever it is.
Sorry, Helen. If you're thinking that way, yes, you are right. I was harking back to my example of it's about a 17% increase on the total bill. You're saying no, that 50% increase on the rateable bit, it would be roughly about 17% increase on that rateable component each year for 3 years, and then.
And then it stays. What level does it stay at after that? That's what I wasn't clear on.
At that highest level. So let's say that you were paying $1,000 and it was going to step up by $150 each year. In year one of this, you'd pay, $1,150. Year two, you pay $1,300. Year four, you pay $1,450, and then that's where you're at.
Then you go to 2.5.
Yes, and then there's sort of CPI stuff
so the
kicks in.
50% rate then continues on.
Yes.
It's better.
Yes. And also, just bear in mind, it refers to the entire rate revenue that we can collect. So if we grow, or when we grow, the impact will be lessened on an individual basis. Thank you. Next.
My name's Dale Curtis. Just a couple of things to ask for your question. One thing to bear in mind is that our water rates have really doubled quite recently anyway, so that's a fair imposition on most people. But my question is, I guess, if we're going to raise this sort of money, how can we trust it's actually going to be well used? Because Armidale doesn't have a very good track history of senior positioned employees taking lots of money but not actually getting much back.
A fair question. A lot of, you know, the easy answer would be trust me, but
It's actually trust me, it's okay.
it's trust me. When we go and seek the rate increase, we actually have to put forward to IPART how that is going to be spent. We just can't say give us a pile of money because we think we need it. It actually has to be, you know, saying we're going to spend, you know, X amount on, you know, asset backlog, this, you know, certain stuff here, there, and everywhere. I understand the turmoil that council has been through. We're lucky in that we have 4 from the previous council are back on, so we have some experience. We have 1 retread, and we have 6 of us are new. And I think, you know, from a councillor perspective, the reason why a lot of us have run was, you know, because of the frustration I guess you all felt. Your question probably wasn't so much at the councillor group, it was more at the general manager group, the management level. I'd have to say, hand on heart, I think we're very blessed to have James Roncon here. And if you look at the turmoil, if you look at, you know, of the past, we're in a much better position. If you look at the quality of recruits James has made, we probably are the envy of the Northwest. So you've put out a very fair question, but it's a very general question, and it's impossible to answer a general question with a specific answer.
Other than the fact that any SRV, the money that's generated has to be demonstrated to be spent on the purposes for which the consultation disclosed that it was made for. So, for example, in 2013, we went out to the public and said, look, we're just not keeping up with our asset backlog. Basically, getting the houses painted and the machinery going and the roads. And so we went out there and agreed on a 10% rate rise over 7 years. And in 2021...
It was 20% you asked for, and that led to what was called...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
People can't hear Margaret.
You asked actually for 20%, and there was a big town hall meeting organised by rural ratepayers who were going to be slogged after the long drought.
Yeah.
And it was named in the papers that came out as a rural ratepayer revolt because the council management treated the rural ratepayers as if they were just...
I'll just repeat the comment. The comment was that it was the ask was for 20%, and there was a sort of revolt of rural ratepayers, which I recall very well. And in fact, I at that time, which is a long time ago now, championed dropping back to the 10% option, which is what happened.
And that's what caused it. How the Armidale Ratepayers, Generic Ratepayers Association was formed then in February 2014. So that ratepayers in rural areas had a voice to council, which we never had before.
Yeah.
And then Armidale people wanted to join that, so that became Armidale Generic.
I wasn't aware that there was a generic Ratepayers Association formed. That's actually news to me right now, but I am aware of the Ratepayers Association being
Well, I was
formed.
one of the foundation members.
Look, let's not get into... I really don't want... what I wanted to just say is to assist and be clear on this, is that at that time, the purpose was clearly put out to the community that it was, that increase for, at that point, 7 years, was to address the asset backlog. And that's part of our ongoing problem, and it hasn't been helped by a forced merger. But anyway, I'm not speaking for or against the proposal, I'm just trying to add some clarity.
Todd, just before we go, I'll just get James to maybe tie a bow around that IPART piece. Before he does, I might just also say, you mentioned water rates. There are some offsetting measures that we're going to look at if we probably regardless of whether we go down this path. But one of them would be looking at our water rates and trying to make there's been plenty of discussion amongst us councillors about that. Now, clearly it's not going to 100% offset it, but we do need to look at the water rates. We also need to look at waste levies. But James, you can tie a bow around IPART stuff. That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Firstly, my apologies for being late. I was just doing a presentation at the MP, so that's
got connotations around it very quickly, but to the Historical Society. So I apologise for being a bit late. Dale, just to tie a bow around what you were saying, essentially not only will council have to tell the community and IPART what it intends to spend those additional funds on, but then we'll have to report against it to not only to the community but back to IPART as part of our annual reporting processes. So there's nowhere to hide in that. It's genuinely got to be an open and transparent process that we're held to account for. So yeah, you'll be able to see all of that very clearly.
Gentleman at the back was very patient. I stole the microphone off him, so here we go.
Hello, my name is Bokora. I've been here for 30 years, and my question is a question of the fundamental premises underlying your projections. We've been here 30 years. When we arrived here, it was just before the recession we had to have, and Armidale was one of the few places in Australia which did not decline, but actually grew economically. The rest of Australia was in a recession. And since we've been here, there have been many, many projections about the future. We arrived in 1992. It was confidently predicted that Armidale's population would reach 50,000 by 2000. Instead, it's been declining. There were a number of significant investments made by the council to expand Armidale's attractivity for enterprises. There was an industry park here, another industry park there. None of them have attracted new industries. There was a driver training school. The airport's been expanded twice since we've been here, and the consequence has been Armidale's population has actually declined since then. In particular, the university recently cut 200 positions there and is planning to move much of its activities to Tamworth. On what realistic basis can you see Armidale growing? How will we attract industries or employment opportunities when we are isolated and inaccessible? Comparison to places like Tamworth or Wagga Wagga or Toowoomba are completely unrealistic because they are much, much closer physically to other large centres, much more accessible with road, rail and everything else.
I think there's a few things to that. We are genuinely we're in a population war. We are trying to compete with other regions for population. But the reasons we like living here aren't what attract others. We need to have better amenities. So the towns that you just mentioned then, sir, they're ones that have actually invested in their region. There has been no reinvestment here by council. Minimal to former councillors around. So we need to do that investment. There's a couple of other things as well that are different now from that to back then. One is the renewable energy zone. That didn't exist. We are unique here in that we have the biggest, or will have, if it's fully operational, the biggest renewable zone in Australia. So
all of that will not replace the jobs you and me just scrapped.
well, that's 200, but
200 permanent, well-paid jobs.
sure. Yeah. Well, one of the challenges, we've got to move from what was traditional, what Armidale's traditionally done.
That's my question. What do you see as realistically possible here?
Okay. The renewable energy zone is realistically possible because it's being built.
Pardon?
So the renewable energy zone is one. Intensive horticulture. So when Costas came, they've added 800 jobs to our region. The alternative is to do absolutely nothing.
Full-time jobs. I know quite a few people work there, and very few are full-time jobs. They're casual, part-time jobs.
I think to add to what Sam's responded here, we've also got an attitudinal change within our council and collectively amongst the councillors to be proactive and to move forward. And so if you have a look at it from a planning perspective, last night when we were in Guyra, we had examples of where people had come forward and said, Armidale's turned business away, and typically Tamworth was the recipient of a lot of that. And so we've heard that thing. I don't think it's rhetoric, it's probably the truth. We don't want to do that anymore, and we've got mechanisms in place, and we're building on them as well internally within the council staffing and the way that those developments are managed, as well as the attitude amongst the councillors. So it all actually starts with attitude and culture. And I think one of the important things that James mentioned was, that Sam mentioned was James. James has come here. He's not even 18 months into the role, and he is driving a complete culture change within Armidale Regional Council, and it's working. And I was down at the Big Chill on the weekend, and I was speaking to someone, and they said, I spoke to someone who's worked for Armidale Regional Council for 28 years, and she came up to me and she said, I love working there now because it's different and it's changing. And when the people on the inside are talking like that, and it's starting to reflect out into the community as well. And we're also being approached by people. So I've received in the last 3 weeks multiple approaches from businesses that are interested in coming to Armidale because they've heard in the grapevine that something has changed here. And that's how it's going to happen. I mean, we don't have a magic wand. There is no silver bullet. But there's a lot of planning and there's a lot of willingness on our part, on the inside, and there's people from the outside. So if we can, those industries that are interested here, and also, I think it's fair to say the renewable energy zone, there are plans attached to that as well.
There are plenty of plans. We need to become a seamless council that we possibly weren't in the past. Todd, just maybe, that we possibly weren't in the past. But sir, if you've got some brilliant ideas, and I'd be interested in proper ideas, and we can talk about this offline. I really want to hear positive stories, and I really want to hear, if you've got a good idea, let's share it. Anyway, John.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris, but this is just to try to fill in a little bit more with the puzzle with that question there. And I'm probably parroting this from last night as well when it came up. There's something that we're missing out on a little bit here as well. Into the future story is we've just came out of COVID, and hopefully we're all here now, and some have got masks on, so we're moving on to a new stage there. We've been through from to hell and back with our drought, our fires, our floods. Luckily here in Armidale we don't get affected so much by fires and floods, even though fires to a certain degree on the outsides of the community here. And I think everyone in the room knows that regional New South Wales is building all the way through the coast, through the tablelands, out in the Western District. So for us to miss out, I think there will be something wrong. Yes, we mightn't get the big population boost that some of the other places get, but even if we're picking up the dregs, we're still going to be building our population. But I believe that Armidale is a bit of a hidden secret. And through our schools and everything else in education, if we can't be picking up city people that are coming and moving up to have a look about, there's really something wrong. But I think that goes to our favour as well. That's something that we as a group of councillors can work on there as well. So thank you for that.
Chris.
Yeah, my name's Chris Preston, and I've worked for local government something like 40 odd years, one as a member of staff and a union organiser. Now, I was just going back to the point of the gentleman up there mentioned about efficiencies, and I don't believe redundancy makes any place any more efficient than anything. Actually, it sends it backwards. My point is, and I agree with the way the dollar is spent. Now, we had a CEO here that was appointed by a consultancy company that come into this organisation that cost this organisation an absolute fortune, that buried $50,000 worth of clothing, brand new clothing, out at the dump. Now, that's the sort of efficiency that we don't want in this organisation. What guarantee have we got that this management won't?
Tell me what guarantee you would like, because I genuinely don't know what guarantee. Because
experienced staff.
Well, no sensible person wants that story that you've mentioned.
Big no.
No sensible person
Well, it happens.
thinks it's, as I said, no sensible person thinks it's a good idea.
It's the same with the problems with the library, the new library. Now that costs us, I understand, this council an absolute fortune to fix. My point is the staff that supervise this type of thing. What would stop this council wearing that clothing again? What are you, as councillors, going to do to stop that sort of thing?
councillors.
Won't change the logo.
We might, I think I think that, you know, your story is an appalling one. There's not a whole lot I can do. So you tell me exactly, maybe offline, what you think an appropriate, you know, what guarantee you'd like, and one that I can realistically do.
Well, all I'm saying is, we didn't have a director of engineering here that had any director of engineering qualifications running this organisation. And they realise a lot of the problems why we've got this $7 million or $6 million debt.
Yeah.
You walk around this town here, our bike tracks. There's a part up there at the Armidale, it's almost covered in grass. The grass growing over the curb and guttering, turning the water out in the middle of the road, bogging it up.
So that speaks to the $7 million asset maintenance shortfall.
That's
But to
right.
come back to your question, what guarantee would you be satisfied with that we could do based on, I mean, you asked me a question that I think is impossible to answer. So I give you the chance to answer that question.
Well, probably, like I said, experienced staff in these areas that the council don't see, and this was under the entire as administrator, that clothing was buried because it didn't have a particular logo on it. Not taking it to the local person down here and have it rebadged. No, let's put them all on pallets, take them to the dump and bury them, escorted by the rangers.
Sure. I don't for a moment think that I think that's a great outcome.
No, it's not, 50,000.
No, I don't think it, and I doubt anyone in the room thinks that's a great outcome. So let's just say, I take your point. I think James's recruitments in terms of the executives, you know, the directors of everything are as good as we are. Sorry, we're thrilled to have you. I wasn't meaning to downplay the executive. We have very good recruitments that have come in. And this is largely as a result of the turnaround and the change in culture here. Armidale was a difficult place to recruit for.
I agree, I know, I was the union organisation.
You'd know better than anyone. So I'd like to think that has changed, and success tends to breed success. So I can't give you any specific guarantee to your question, and I don't think any councillor here can. But I would like to think that we are all sensible enough and we're working in the right... I'm just going to give you a pat answer. Understand your point, wasn't good. I don't think there's anything we can do to give you a guarantee, but you know, I'm confident, and I reckon most of us councillors are confident, under the current management, that sort of thing wouldn't happen again.
I would back that. I went through it all and we didn't know about that because councillors don't get told things like that.
No,
But I just want to say I'm probably the longest serving councillor still on it, 10 years. Things are like chalk and cheese. Like, there's an expression that I shouldn't really say, shit happens, shit's happened. And largely it was a result of a forced merger, but it's over and we've just got to recover.
I think in a lot of ways it's due to bringing a certain consultant in to develop that structure. Now, I understand...
Yes, it is, but it's over.
It's
We've
over.
actually got a really good outcome now.
It's good that we learn from the past.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
that the future isn't repeated. That's all I'm saying.
I
Then
think
we
we,
won't end up in this situation.
I think we hear you loud and clear. I think it's very apparent.
Up the back.
We've got...
Sorry, not quite up the back.
I'm Dennis Chalkers. Previous councils that I've been here since 1975. The population of Armidale was 14,000. Tamworth's population, and I know you don't want to fight against Tamworth, was 20,000. We were promised that with them that we had, it could have saved us with 60,000 population. Now, times have changed, and the only time that we ever grew here was when the late Bill McCarthy was mayor, and good on him, and same with Richard Torbay. Now, the rest of the times, we don't know where on earth our money's been going. We haven't seen any improvements. We've been knocking industries like Coca-Cola and how big are they around the world. When we start knocking them out, Arnott's biscuits are national pride and joy. and trucking industries, left, right and centre, were located ideally between Sydney and Brisbane, could have had excessive warehouses, our population could have increased twofold by that time. You want more population? We could have had it back around about 5, 10, 20 years ago. And we're remaining stagnant. We're not thriving, we're diving.
That's what I've been saying. We need to.
We're in absolute agreement there. I'll come to you now. But I think the point there is that we're going to say yes instead of no. And I think, I don't think there's any one person that was on the council 20 years ago or in the management. So I don't think there's anyone there that's responsible for that. And we agree with what you're saying.
Why didn't councils before do it?
It's another question that we can't answer.
My name's Sam. Unlike most people who have spoken, I haven't been here for 30 years. I haven't been anywhere for 30 years. I moved to Armidale just shy of 10 years ago. I came here for university. And what I've noticed as someone who is young person, young friends and all of that, is that I've come for university and I stayed, and I can tell you now that I'm the only person in amongst my group of friends and my cohort that stayed. Most people got out of Armidale the first chance they got, and if I were to ask, I don't think any of them would move back given the chance. What I think is one of the big problems is that I know that I, for example, I go to Tamworth every chance I get, go shopping because there's nothing to do here. You go on holidays off to the coast just for something to do because there isn't much to do here. I want to know what your plan is to keep university students here, because we have this wonderful university that gets a new group of people in every year, and our population is boosted for a few months, and then they all move away when they finish their degree. So I want to know what your plan is to keep young people here.
We've got a lot of one similarity is we're both called Sam. I went to university here, moved away for 20 years, and I came back at age 40. One of the really easy thing, and brought my, then young family, who are now 10 years older, back. One of the, I reckon the easy tricks for us to grow our population is every year I'd say that, let's say the schools around here are pumping out 200 or 300 kids at the end of year 12. Most of the kids, a handful will get a job. Those that go to uni will usually move away. If we can make our amenities sufficiently attractive for them to hang on for another couple of years, that boosts our population. The other one is I came back at age 40. If we had sufficient amenity, so there's no heartland here. The mall, you could fire a cannon in the mall at 4 o'clock and not hit anyone. You'd just be arrested for noise pollution, not murder. There is no heart, there is no hub. And that is the symptom of a low population. So there's a little bit of chicken and eggy things that we can do, but one of them is we need to, fix up our planning, which we're in the throes of doing. So our environmental plans allow us to repurpose certainly how the town centre is done. We need to bring some vibrancy back in there. But if we can attract people back at age 35 with young families as opposed to age 40, that's going to be a huge thing as well. So it's not just the raw numbers, but it's a demographic shift of who we can bring. And this is, I mentioned before, those other regional towns, and they don't have to be big, but the other regional towns that have invested in their civic infrastructure and have had money to spend on amenities are the ones that are growing. There's even an example of a town I travel through regularly, Emerald in central Queensland. It's absolutely pumping, but it's got about 15,000 people, but the council has spent money on doing it up and making it a vibrant place. We haven't. We've just tried to save our way to success. So it's not that field of dreamsy simple as build it and they will come, but there is certainly an element to that. There are more jobs kicking around now. There's certainly more industry, despite what some people think, sniffing around because we see those opportunities coming to us. So they will start to form a little bit of glue. But if we can match that enthusiasm with some council-led investment in amenities, then we will start to see it. More power to you. Bring some friends back, but you know, you'll be a case study for us, Sam. We need to find out what you like, why it worked for you, and sell that story. So that's really, if we continue the current way, if we don't do anything, we do exactly the same thing, we don't have a hope in hell of growing.
Just to add to your question, Sam, and your answer, Sam, about the university director, we also, Sam, myself and James's executive and myself sat in this room with the university executive and the Vice-Chancellor 4 weeks ago. And we're working actively to try and, you know, link up better for a more progressive combined outcome. So we are, you know, they're all good ideas, we're working on them.
But the role isn't solely of council.
No.
But what we have to be is we need to do, you know, our part as best we can. We are the enablers. So we need to be enablers and facilitators. We aren't 100% responsible for growth, but we certainly don't want these accusations thrown around that we have stifled growth. And I know that has happened in the past. So in terms of what are we going to do, seamless council, but invest to make this as attractive as possible and throw it back on the community as well. Other growth initiatives around jobs that we can do, and this is, you know, we've got to set a few more things up, but we can start doing reverse trade missions. We can go down, we can speak to government, we can speak to, you know, targeted industries about, you know, headquartering here. And I've had offers from a number of business leaders around town offering to, you know, accompany me on those sorts of trips to speak to people about why they're headquartered here and why it's a good thing. So, you know, we can be proactive as well.
Can I jump in?
Love you too, Brad.
Thank you. Those that don't know me, Bradley Witters. Sam, back to your point, a lot of people, now I went to school here, preschool, primary school, high school, stayed here and raised my kids here. A lot of people move away because the jobs aren't there in the traditional thing. These ones down the bottom have the opportunity to provide more jobs for people to stay. Like if you can't get a job here, then what's the point of staying? If you've got more opportunities in the different areas where people are getting their trades in nowadays and their university degrees and all that sort of stuff, as Sam said, and the right amenities, it gives them reason to come here. Like when I was working at the high school, primary school, we talked about the kids up in Cape York, giving them the skills to live in Cape York or New York, and that's what we have to do here. Giving them the skills to grow up here, learn everything they need to, go out and travel the world, but come back. Do what people like Sam and Todd and that, like give them a reason to come back. Find a reason for them to come back and they'll come back. And it goes back to Sam's point of thing. So that's what we're looking to do. We can talk about everything that happened in the past. That's perfect and we can waste our time. Or we can talk about what we're trying to do and look towards the future and have a future focus from not just the council but from the population as well. The more positivity the council puts out there, as Sam and Paul have said, we're the enablers, but we need you to be the doers. All these things about, Tim, let's go on ahead, or we should have got this, we should have got that, that's fine. But let's talk about the good things that we're doing now, so that when people ask about Armidale, they're hearing the good things. They're hearing all these sorts of things. Because as someone that's lived here for 40 years, I'm sick of hearing this town got that, this, but there's never any future focus. Let's be future focused. Let's be the people that draw everyone in. Let us do that as a community.
Yep. Gordon.
Gordon Cope, and to my great surprise, I've been here over 30 years. Time passes. I came here for a job. Seemingly the last place in the world you could get one, but I did. With Social Security, I was the senior social worker for Social Security and then later for Centrelink. So I got to know a lot about the region. I want to make 4 points. The first one is about history. There have been quite a lot of speakers who brought up what on earth happened in the past. Now, a lot of us know some of the detail. A lot of the detail is not well known. And I think we need, pretty much like a truth commission, to find out exactly what did happen and write it down and publish it. The question, it matters, Brad, because we don't want to repeat the mistakes. And the populace needs to know, instead of just this shotgun approach of criticising council, the populace needs to know where were the bad apples, how did it go wrong. They need to know that so we don't repeat it. Second point, looking for growth in industry, there's been a bit of a checkered history. I mean, we had one of the speakers mention the Coca-Cola debacle, but Coca-Cola was never going to come here. There is no way you can make money out of putting water in a bottle and sending it 500 kilometres to either Sydney or Brisbane. It just can't be done. That was a nonsense. However, there are industries here that are thriving and growing at a great rate. You all probably know about Uniplan. Uniplan keeps doubling almost, it seems, every year. It has had an extraordinary growth rate, and if you've been past Acacia Park recently, you will notice one of the biggest sheds I have ever seen. Obviously, there are bigger ones in China and the United States, but this is a thumping big shed, and they are increasing their capacity again. Now, the beauty of Uniplan and their business plan is that they are building high-value products. The cost of shipping those products is also high, but it's a small part of the whole cost and the whole profit of the business. So they can afford to do it because they're making high-value product. So when we go out to target industries, we need to look at industries that fill that bill. The ones that can get their product to market without going broke. Third point is most community development officers will tell you you need to do the things you're good at. Armidale is very good at education, and we're very good at the arts. We're an extraordinary town. On the back of the 25,000, I gather the 29,000 includes Gyra, is that right, Sam? On the back of 25,000 people, we do produce an enormous amount of wonderful cultural activity. That can be businessified. There is a place for arts business, whether that is in film or video or television, whether that is in training. There are many avenues to be developed, and we can make ourselves the arts capital of the Northwest. Fourth point is sort of going backwards a bit and being a little less positive. When we talk about growth, there's often a component of growth that is overlooked, and that is what happens when you have massive growth. If you look at towns like Queanbeyan and Dubbo, their growth rates were enormous, and so was their crime rate, and so was their social upheaval rate. So there are many things to consider and many things to plan. If we're going down the growth track, we need to plan very, very carefully about how we're going to avoid those pitfalls. That's 4, I think.
Thanks, Gordon. And just to mention, in the top corner, the bottom box, manufacturing, that's the example, there's Uniplan, so that's actually that there, and I think we're in vehement agreement that a lot of the ideas that you've had, furious. Okay.
Chap just in front.
Yeah, Jock Coventry. We've had a lot of questions about history, but most of them seem to point to the transparency of decision making within council. And I'd have to say that we're seeing something different tonight. That's got to be applauded. We've been very complacent in Armidale because we've had the university. We don't need that other stuff because there's been this income coming in. I'm in retail. I'm really sad to hear that Sam's going to Tamworth to do her shopping. How can I grow my business if we all think that like that? And we do. We have for many, many years. Question is, how can we best be involved in making this all happen?
That's a great question, Jock, and I reckon there's no one single answer to that. But one thing I've been saying to a lot of groups that I've spoken to who have asked that, we need to get out there and start telling the positive stories. There are a lot of, Brad even touched on it before. There are a lot of good things that happen in this town, but attitudinally, we're a region that we're very good at navel gazing. We're very good at looking at what went wrong. So we need to find these good stories and we need to celebrate them. We almost need to be American in attitude, and let's curate our brand. But it's true. We need to be really positive and tell the good stories. If you hear of a good story, you need to share it. That's probably the first thing. The other one is if you have a good idea and you think council can play a part, come and see us. That we are the group that should be connecting dots. We should be able to connect you with people. We will be able to concierge you through, DAs much faster than in the past. So if you do have a good idea and if you think council can have any role in it, please come and see us. Any one of us councillors would gladly have a chat to you, as would the right people in the executive. Share your good ideas, but those good ideas need to go that step further, not just, hey, council, here's an idea, off you pop and do it. That wellspring of good ideas there, where all the effort falls on council to realise someone else's dream, that is absolutely endless here. So we probably do need some of those ideas to be thought out a little bit further. So, there's a couple of things. I'd also, the fact that you've all turned up here, I reckon, is absolutely fantastic. If there, I don't know what the opportunities will be, but when there are opportunities where we as a council group want to come to the community, the fact that you've all attended is great. So, keep that attendance up, keep that enthusiasm up.
So why don't you have a kind of an ideas box on the website so people can put good ideas?
That's the first good idea, we'll do that. that is. Kelly's jotting notes, thank you.
We got a question, gentlemen.
Also?
Paul Holman's my name. Just going to take us back to tours, back to Hip Pocket. That 50% increase, now I imagine on that base rate is based on the land value.
Yes.
My understanding, just reading in the Sydney papers, Armidale land property prices have gone up. So quite obviously the land valuation is going to go up. That's going to give you a sugar hit of an increase. And also, what guarantees are there, because what you've presented is presuming there will be no increase on the Waterfall Way land levy, the water charges, all those things. Are they going to stay the same? You're going to give a commitment to that? Or in all likelihood, they'll also go up in that time? And getting back to the renewable energy zone, how are they, assessed? Is there any contribution? Do they get rated differently once we've got those set up? Is there something that council gets more rate revenue because of that as well? So a number of questions.
I'll try and remember going backwards. At the moment, there isn't anything about a separate rateable use for the renewable stuff, but it's not as though we haven't been talking and thinking about that. In terms of the rates and charges, I think there's a modest increase planned for some of those, a CPI style thing. Everything that you guys suffer with in fees and charges, everything that you suffer, council suffers from an inflationary point of view. I mentioned before that we are going to re-examine the water charges and the water usage and just try and, I don't want to give too much away, but there is a discussion around that, and I suspect there'll be some leeway coming your way. But no, the genuine uplift comes from the rate. It's not sneaky stuff through charges. I also think that we're demonstrating here tonight and elsewhere we're very transparent. So I'm not going to come out and say it's only the rate stuff, but we'll sneak it in through charges. That will just undo every bit of goodwill that we're trying to instill. So there will be. I'm not going to give you any guarantee that we'll never increase it because I'm not colossally stupid. But we'll be sensible.
Can I just say that the new rates and charges are the new fees and charges are on the website, Kelly? They're up on the website and everyone can look at them. And in general, they've gone up by the CPI 2.1%. 2.9.
So about 2.5% on those fees and charges increases.
Question from the gentleman halfway up.
I'm Graham Patterson. I've been here since 1975, and you were talking about our assets. I don't know of any town where we have got such incredible facilities in terms of art, music, drama and sport. I've participated in all of them and the standard is incredible, which is fantastic, and people should take advantage of it. However, if I want to watch the Sydney Swans, I go to Sydney. If I want to see an opera, I go to Sydney. If I want to watch a test match, I go to Sydney. We have got to let people know that if they leave Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane and come to Armidale, sell their city house and buy a house in Armidale, they can put $500,000 in their pocket. That $500,000 will allow them not just to go to Sydney to watch the cricket, they can go to Lord's. They can go to watch the opera in New York because they'll have so much extra cash if they bring themselves here and live and benefit from what we've got to offer. And when they do want something at the top level, they'll have the money to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I think they'll be able to afford a membership at Lord's if they can wait long enough.
Stuff for kids, mate, they get their own money.
Anyone else?
Yeah, there were a few. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Laura here. This is sort of, this process is around the community strategic plan and the delivery program, but because of the economic issue, we're discussing the rates and so on pretty much tonight, as opposed to the meat of the plan and documents that are on display for people. With respect to the special rate variation, the question there then would be, when will that actually go up for public viewing, and then when will the date be that you would be making a decision? So that would be question one. Two, this process itself is going to end on June 8th. This public exhibition of the Community Strategic Plan Delivery Program financing and the budget that we haven't really talked about per se in terms of the actual details of all of that. And there's a lot of interesting, good stuff in there. And one thing I just will comment on, which is really great, is that it recognises the climate emergency declaration that we had 2.5 years ago. And it's part of the document, which is wonderful because it's got actions inside it that are moving towards that. And it's got actions inside it that are moving towards a number of things. And this is also a great opportunity because it's a community consultation. But once the June 8th thing happens, I guess the statutory requirement for consultation on that plan ends, per se. So what I guess I would like to see is, or know how you would be visaging that we could continue this conversation, because I think people have lots of different good ideas around how to help this, this idea happen. Might have different ideas about growth. I mean, I don't disagree with growth, but I would like to see growth that entails sustainability and environmental support, and which is the second piece of the five top items that this community wanted. That one with economic growth, two was environmental sustainability. So things like circular economy, what's happening with our recycling, this first class supposedly, like how the industries that we do bring in, that they themselves have that kind of integrity in their own operations and so on. I think there's a lot to be offered, and so I guess that question is around further consultation after this consultation ends, and then that first question about the rates.
I'd say we're fairly open, and Annette, you as an individual and your group SLA are very good at, getting in front of us. I mean, not that you force your way in. We actually we actually do want to engage you. So maybe a general answer to your question would be, if you are a member of the community and you want to speak and have a voice, you're probably the best way to do that and be involved in consultation. The best thing to do would be to join one of the various community groups around. I'm not saying that that's the necessary gateway to get in. Happy to speak to individuals, but it's easier for us to engage with groups. So in terms of further input into the community plan, etc., well, probably not a whole lot there, but in terms of just general dialogue in shaping which direction we go, we're all very open to that. So councillors, anything else?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Sorry, the other one. And
is there a specific date, I suppose, other than the 8th of June? I mean, it's got to be in by the 30th.
That's the SRV.
No.
Annette's query was about the SRV process.
No. I'm sorry, Annette, you were talking about the community plan and those sorts of dates. The other thing that I guess, in terms of involvement, is that what used to be the council committees, it's not just a name change, but we're calling them key pillar working groups. And so, you know, different small groups of councils are going to be working on different areas. And the idea is there that each of those working groups will focus on a specific issue for a 3-month period to get an outcome. And why we want to do it within 3 months is that we can then go to relevant members of the community and ask them if they would like to be part of this particular working group, but for a 3-month thing, rather than go out to members of the community and say, would you like to join a council committee for 4 years? People run shrieking from the room. If you want to be involved in things, we'd love to hear from you and understand what your special interest is and what your skill set might be. So then if one of the key pillar working groups is attacking an area where, you know, you have an interest, expect a phone call. So I think there is, that's probably the best way that we can get specialist input. In terms of dates, were you really referring to the community plan or the SRV component?
Yeah, the SRV component, because that's going to come after the community strategic plan is presumably endorsed.
Yes.
So what's the date for that? Proposed date?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So working backwards, Annette, we've got it lodged by February. The application to IPART for their consideration, which would then February 23, so next year, which would then come into force if it was granted in the 23-24 financial year. Working back from there, we would expect council to be making a decision on that following consultation. So sorry, I'll work backwards. We've got to lodge by February next year if we're going to put the application in. The consultation will, from 1 July, essentially will start with the community around, and we've got to do a little bit of prep work, but obviously we'd be looking to be out in the community probably August, September, October, around that time period, in terms of being able to have some a significant amount of meaningful engagement right across the region. And then council would be, once they've collated all of that, council would be making a decision probably around November or December, again with the view to lodging in February. So that's broadly the time frame for that SRV process.
I thought Annette was saying, can we have another meeting to actually discuss the community the community plan in its draft form? I don't know if that was.
Sorry, Annette, Margaret's question was, are you after another meeting to discuss the community plan in its draft form?
Only if it's like 5 minutes long. I guess what James just explained actually is really good, because it means that you're actually going to be in community consultation from July to the end of the year anyway with respect to the social rate variation. Ideally, I would imagine it would be very useful that this conversation continues and that more of the meat of the, that's probably not the correct word, I don't know, anyway, the good stuff inside the community strategic plan and the delivery program is explored in the context of that. So that would be a really positive thing to me, community engagement.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Siri Gamage. I have been living here since 1990 and worked at the UN for about 30 years. Actually, I like to start by thanking the Council for engaging with these difficult issues and preparing a sort of future plan for this region. I'd like to make one comment and then of course ask a question, particularly about the rates. The comment is that in the community there is a view, emerging view, that if there's a rate rise like this, the people who want to come to Armidale region will think twice. So I like to, just inform about that to the council. And secondly, the question is, in each of those 3 years where the rate rise will apply, how much of extra income are you generating in each of those 3 years? And then how long will it take to clear the shortfall in funding that you have at the moment?
Okay. Thank you. It's in terms of the question, how much, if the rate rise goes through and we applied over a 3-year period. It's roughly 3.5 million in the first year, 7 million in the second year, and 10.5 in the third year. So we will have a bit of a shortfall, but we can start to shape our activities to meet, to ramp up that way. If the special rate variation isn't granted, then we have to have a total rethink and shape what we do and what sort of region we become. So yeah, the numbers are about 3.5 million, around 7 million, around 10.5 million.
I guess Siri had a question as well about will the rate variation scare people away? At the moment, I don't see hundreds of thousands of people flocking in, so they're scared away by something else at the moment. So I think we've got to do something different. And if we don't have some more money, we can't fix the, someone said about the bike paths got grass and the roads are not good and the footpaths here and, we've got to... Sorry?
It doesn't flood.
It doesn't flood. That could be our theme. It can come to Armidale, it doesn't flood. Except the creek that floods every fortnight. But other than that, this lady here in the front.
I'm Priscilla Conger, my husband Brian. We came in the early 70s to Armidale when we had a very good town gown population which acted in the way you're talking about. It invested a lot in our infrastructure and our creeklands and things like that. It was a very energetic, enthusiastic, visionary, cooperative council, very active. I just want to say how wonderful it is to come to a meeting like this tonight and see we've got a similar council again. And I just hope my husband and I live long enough to see your vision fulfilled.
We all hope that.
Oh, sorry. You want to speak into this one?
Do you want to speak to that? Borrow that for a minute, Lou, and then... Okay. Dorothy.
I just want to say that the first part of that vision is to get everybody together, and the first deadline that we have is the 8th of June, where we want input from everybody, not just on the rates, because the rates decision will be taken up to over the next 4 or 5 months, but first of all on the community strategic plan and the delivery programme, because that's vitally important that we get that right and we get the interaction with the community, because the more ideas you have and you bring to us, the more vibrant the city will be. So we want the vibrancy, we want your ideas, we want to know what you want, and that is really how we will make the city the place where everybody wants to come, is to have everybody's input and get the city and the environment that we all want to live in.
Can I just say, I'm sure you all know, but this is a particularly important, pivotal time in terms of that, what are we calling it? The regional something growth community plan. No, anyway, it's called, it used to be known as the Community Strategic Plan, but we've slightly rebadged it, but it still has the words community plan in it. Now that's your aspirational plan. It's mandatory, so every council has to have one. And that guides expenditure for the next 4 years. In fact, this term of council is quite short. It's about 2.5 years, I think. But you're locked in. So I just want to emphasise what Dorothy said, that now is the moment to kind of really look hard at that. And if you agree with it, say so. And if you don't, say so, because otherwise it's in for, the duration of this term of council.
So I just wanted to endorse what Margaret and Dorothy said, but also to say that as councillors, we have looked at all the programs and all the services that council provides, and we haven't, this is the plan that we're proposing. The council has to endorse it, but you have to give your, you have to say yay or nay to it, right? So we're suggesting this rate rise in order to provide the services that the community has said we really want. okay? We've got a bunch of assets, and we want your opinion, okay? But it's about the region we want. It's about the services we want. It's about things. But you've got to say something to us.
Can I just add one more thing on that? It's an idea that ran through my head. A lot of the times when things go out on public display and we get comments back, they're very specific on a certain issue. Annette made a good point that there's more than just the budget and everything else on display at the moment. I said last week at the meeting that read through all of it, have a look at everything that's on display at the moment, and come back with comments that are broad-based on all the different issues, that not just one, but all the different issues, because as councillors we have to look at all the different issues, not just one. So if you want us to look at your thoughts on the whole thing, look at the whole thing and comment on the whole thing. Don't just be pigeonholed into one idea, because we're not pigeonholed into one idea. We have to look at the whole thing as a broad thing. So if you want your opinion and voice to be heard by the councillors, think of the way the councillor would, and look at the whole thing and pick out the points of the whole thing that you want to add to it.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the...
Sorry, Sam. Lou Forsyth. A question on the renewable energy zone. What are your foreseen windfalls that you're planning to get from them, and when do you see that happening?
Thanks, Lou. The renewable energy zone it's a grey area, and council doesn't have a lot of sticks to beat people up with. So it's a state significant development, and that puts us in a tougher position. So to counter that, one of the first things that I did, now this is at a mayoral level, I asked the mayors from Inverell, Glen Innes, Uralla and Walker to come to Armidale, and we had a chat about sticking together, having a unified approach to the renewable energy zone. I'll answer your question. So to have a unified approach to the renewable energy zone, and we drew up a statement of expectations that renewables projects would ideally meet. There were 3 essential terms and 3 desirable terms. So the 3 essential terms we were after, the first one was a community benefit to be paid into a centralised fund. So the idea behind that is to build a future fund, akin to the federal government's future fund. So the community benefits, the way that some of these renewable projects try and do community benefits is that they just throw money around for the duration of the asset, and then that's it. We need to be smarter, because this is our one-off opportunity. This is our potential mining boom. We need to get it right. So if we can have that delayed gratification of taking that money, putting it in a centralised fund, and then using that money, and this fund would be related to council, but it would be an independently managed, independent board, independent investment committee. This is what's in my mind. It would invest in income-producing assets in our region, and the income from said assets would then be distributed for community benefits. So rather than the whole thing just being frittered away, and that's been the experience at Glen Innes. And so when I proposed that, they thought, this is brilliant. So we're going to see that sort of thing happen. The other one that we want from it is a decommissioning bond. Now that isn't the government, the council wouldn't do that, but what we really want to do is to push the state government to sort out a decommissioning bond in the same way that they do for mining companies. So I'm ambivalent whether that's upfront, whether it's tail-ended, but something that gives us certainty that when a project finishes, it's going to be decommissioned appropriately. The third one, and this is really key, this is of the essentials, is genuine local engagement, and for council to actually sign off on that engagement. So our res of 8 gigawatts was oversubscribed allegedly by 400%. So 32 gigawatts of projects said we were interested. In an ideal world, we really need to, and I've had some discussions with both Energy Co and the Energy Minister, or representative of the Energy Minister, he had COVID, just around this. So if we could really choose which of these, some list of projects best suit our region, that would be great. At the moment, there is nothing requiring that to happen. So these energy projects just pop up, unbeknownst to us. So we need to get on the front foot, and we need to really agitate. Now, it's easier to do that as being a New England res group rather than Armidale Regional Council, because we can make a lot more noise. And I'd like council to actually sign off that a renewables project has actually done sufficient community engagement, not just absolute bare minimum. So that's what we saw as the essentials, and then there were some desirables in there. So part of the desirables were, the first one was a power purchase agreement. The next one was any carbon offsets or biosecurity offsets be purchased from our region. So from the LGA, biodiversity, what was it? Security. Biodiversity officers, thank you, Todd. It's been hell since when he was away. So that they be purchased from the local government area where that project's being set up. If they can't purchase it or require it from our LGA, they can go to another LGA within the res. If everything's exhausted there, then council can sign off and say, go further afield. And the final one was some telecommunications infrastructure. So they're the things that we are trying to do as a lobbying group. Now, it is a group of mayors. It's not endorsed by council, because that way we don't have to commit any funds to it yet. And we're still sort of building our way around it. So to circle back to your question, what can we get out of it and when's that going to happen? It will depend on the actual projects coming through, when we can get wind of it, and when we can start being a nuisance. So there are some that are, up and running and, we missed the boat there. The one at Tillbuster, we didn't miss the boat. There's been another one in the wings that we've spoken to in the last couple of weeks, and we're having ongoing conversations with them about, what it might mean for our community. And it's really important that we do this, because with us being the largest renewable zone, we are doing the bulk of the heavy lifting in this region. Sorry, our region is doing the bulk of the heavy lifting in Australia. So if it's fully operational, our res will offset 11% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions, which is the equivalent of taking 12.5 million cars off the roads or planting 500 million trees. So we are doing a lot, but for the wider community, we're not getting much in return. There's a feel-good factor, absolutely no doubt about that. But in terms of, what's coming back, sure, some of the landholders might get an uplift, but all of that power is pumped into the grid and shipped around Australia. So we really need to, as a council, be organised and be agitators. In terms of timelines, certainly this term of council, I think we'll start to see things come in, but hopefully it will grow from there. What we do need, and I've shared this statement of expectations with a couple of the other renewable energy zones around New South Wales. So I think as a block, our 5 councils here are fairly powerful, but if all of the renewable energy zones lock in, then I think if we're all behind it, then we will actually get traction. I have been told a lot of what we are asking for, it's all too hard, it's not in the legislation, but I can push back fairly hard. So I did suggest they bake it into the legislation, pop it back into the oven, and we won't have any trouble. So we will see. We're on track there.
I just wanted to add that the determination as to approvals of these things is with the JRPP, which is a state body. There's 2, I think, local representatives, but the decision is made basically by a state decision-making body. The fact that the res is here, everything about it is state government policy. We have an election in about 9 months, so really there's a bit of heavy lifting for all the residents of the Northern Tablelands electorate to do lobbying themselves because council's doing its absolutely best, but it's not actually something that we're endowed with a lot of power over. We're pushing as hard as we can back, but it's really, the pinch point is at the state government level and your local member.
Thank you. Guys, there've been a few people leave, which makes me think Midsummer Murders must be about to start. How about we just do 2 more questions, then we can flee. So we'll do Helen again, Rob up the back, and then we will loiter. So if you want to come up and pigeonhole us, great.
Thank you. Helen Webb, Sustainable Living, Armidale. I haven't been in town as long as Priscilla and Brian have, but it's my experience in the last year since I've been here. I also really appreciate it feels like there's an energy and a cohesive council really trying to do something and make a difference, and same with the general manager and the staff that he's employed. I've seen a real shift in approachability and actually listening and doing stuff. So I thank you for all the hard work that you've been putting in, because I know that you have been doing hard work on this. Just one other thing I'd like to add, Annette mentioned the climate emergency declaration, and I know that there are many other things to think about, but I think it's really important to keep that in mind. I think most of you were here in 2019, and we know that council actions were brought to their knees by that drought. We couldn't move in that situation. We couldn't move forward. We couldn't grow. The dams were empty. You know what it was like. The trees were dying. I've been talking to people in Lismore, and they're saying how, look, we just haven't got energy to do all the other things that we were trying to do because we're just trying to recover and get back to where we were. We need to be mindful that these sort of events are predicted to increase intensity and frequency, and so I think that it's a great idea when things are going well to actually put money in to try to get the baseline set up, but keep in mind the climate issue when in all of that, because you were talking about the renewable energy zone, Sam. There's that thing of we could be getting the zero emissions, contributing to zero emissions for Australia, and Armidale community not actually accessing those. So that's one thing. And another thing is preparedness, being ready, having things so that when we get future things like that long intense drought, or that we get floating rains or storms or something like that, that we've got things in place. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Helen.
Last question. Rob?
Rob Richardson. My questions, comments are rate related. Question, the 2.5 additional rate variation, has that been approved? Or is that's gone to IPART, or has IPART said we can have it? Or?
It's gone to IPART, so waiting a decision.
Okay, so that's that one.
Sorry, it was my understanding that the state government approved the 2.5% increase for all councils, apart from IPART.
No, they said we could apply for it. Most councils did apply for it, so the IPART decision was that the rate peak was at 0.7%, and so we could apply for another, 1.8 to get up to 2.5, where pretty much every council had set their budgets at a 2.5%.
The next thing, just to clarify something, Margaret, Councillor O'Connor talked about the temporary special rate variation in 2014 or 2013. That stayed temporary until 2021 when it became permanent. So we have to remember that 10% is now, that became a permanent rate addition in January 2021. And I guess my question, is sort of picking up on something that Annette said, I just need a little bit of clarification on the extraordinary council meeting from last week. Now, the way that, and all the councillors who spoke, I'm pretty sure are here tonight. I'm not going to sort of name who said what, but the tone of that meeting was very much around the 50% special rate variation. It wasn't necessarily on delivery plans and things on public display until the 6th of June. It was around this, so one councillor said, urged everyone to put in detailed submissions, read everything. That's fine, but then sometimes the band-aid just has to be ripped off quickly. Now, I'm confused as to what that was referring to. Like, do we have to just accept the 50% special rate variation? Another councillor showed some concern for the community. This is going to be a bit of an impost on the community. Another councillor spoke about we need to look at other ways apart from just a special rate variation as to get ourselves out of this situation. So I came away thinking everything has to be geared by the end of this submission, the end of this public display towards the special rate variation, and that asked a really important question, which James answered, that really the whole discussion on the 50% special rate variation is only just beginning, and that we've got plenty of time to put in a submission. So the councillors who spoke on that at that meeting, were they really aware that there's quite a long time to go before this decision is even made on the special rate variation and IPART are requested? So I guess that's my question.
I'll just try and summarise that fairly quickly. The delivery plan is aspirational, and it's in reality, it's assumed that or predicated on that special rate variation coming in. So, whilst it's not locked in, councillors, we went through a fairly extensive budgeting process where we were shown, we looked at different models and different options, and the one that we decided that we would spend the most time on, it really was a delivery plan to grow, because the others really weren't that palatable. So I wouldn't hang your hat on or point any fingers at councillors based on what they said and where. I think they went into it understanding that we have a growth mindset, and to do that special rate variation, we need to assume that will come through, because that's that is the plan that we fell in behind if we're going to grow. So yeah, that's probably it. I'm not sure how really. I don't really understand the concern behind your question. So it's not locked.
Well, do we have a short period of time to get a submission in about the special rate variation, or do we have to listen to
No, James spoke about that before. We'll have months to talk about the special rate variation.
That wasn't what I picked up from the extraordinary meeting.
Okay, well, if you did,
I think the most contentious piece of that meeting, of course, Rob, was around that, and I guess there was a heightened awareness about that, and it's probably a little bit like being fed to the lions in a way if you go out and just talk about the good stuff without talking about the bad stuff. But yes, you're right, there was more concentration about it, but everyone's aware of it, everyone's got the papers, everyone's read the process, but I can tell you what, when the news hit the airwaves Friday a week ago, the news spread fast, and they weren't talking about the community plan. They were talking about a 50% special rate variation. So I guess that was what was discussed.
So we're pretty anxious. We're pretty anxious about putting up for public display a blueprint, if you like, for the next 4 years and 10 years that actually was based on a presumption.
Sorry, I'll use my ordinary voice. That was based on a presumption of a successful SRV application. Not all of us necessarily, agree with that, because it's actually the community's response that we're waiting to hear. And I guess what I said was, please respond, because you might want to go this way. You know, you might want to show up to 50% and just, you know, shoot high, and that might be a good way of ripping off the Band-Aid, which somebody else said. On the other hand, there are other options, but it's really, you know, if we're going to be transparent, the community has to be too. And I, for one, was anticipating a pretty savage response from the community about, you know, suggesting a 50% SRV, because, you know, all the news we see on the telly is, you know, and it's in the supermarkets, I know, cauliflowers are $9.90. They used to be $2.30. And petrol's, you know, so much more. The cost, you know, we're faced everywhere with cost of living issues, and then we just sort of, you know, skip the loo and say, oh, we just want 50% more after we just put water up by 60%.
Why not grow cauliflowers with extra money?
Sorry?
Why not grow cauliflowers with extra money?
I know.
We will if we...
I know. Actually, I think there could be a boom in home gardening because... But I mean, anyway, I can tell you, I remain anxious about the whole thing. But of course, you know, I'm being very transparent now. I'm anxious about it, but you know, it's really a matter for you guys.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Backham, councillor. Rob, just to answer part of the question of what's most immediate is the 22-23 budget. And if you recall my conversation at the ECM, it was directed, and I made it very clear that what was more immediate to me in concern was how we deliver a 22-23 budget, given, as the Mayor said, what our sort of precarious financial situation is and our limited ability to invest in the short term. All councillors agreed, and I even said a thing that I agree with all the initiatives that the director and the GM, the directors group and the GM were asking for, and I did put it out, it's about timing. Sam's talked about things that, you know, other councils kick things down the road and therefore they've been able to deliver surpluses. I'm not quite sure that that's the time to do things. We shouldn't necessarily kick things down the road. We should be bullish about it. We should go jumping in, boots and all. We should try to get the planning team some good documents in some good ways so that we can be the enablers and the facilitators of growth. And to do that, we need to invest some money. We need to invest in finance systems and replenishment of finance systems so that the information comes quicker. Potentially that will lead to efficiencies where there's less finance people trying to crunch numbers and more about delivering financial services and financial advisory services than actually historical, or as I call it, as an accountant, hysterical bookkeeping services. That's not what we're about. We're about advising services, and we need better information and quicker to get there. So what is immediate, what I was asking everyone to look at, is how do we do business? What should be the business rules around subsidies and cross-subsidisation of programs? If you want an airport, do we want to pay for it? Do we want childcare centres? Are we going to pay for it? And how do we want to pay for it? Do we want to cross-subsidise it or we don't? Do we want the tip to make money? Do we want the tip not to make money? And that's how, you know, that's just what I'm saying. In the most immediate term, the operational plan 22-23 needs to be discussed, needs to have your feedback, because we have a short term to put that in place. July 1 is just around the corner, and that's where we as a collective council need to get your support to move forward with that initial $3 million deficit budget, which puts us on a platform and a way to progress out of it. The 50% variation, I think that I was on the full understanding we have more time to consult on that, and that would come out in due process. But the shock factor, it's sticker shock. We get it, and that's why we're giving that opportunity for you more to go down the thing. Sam's, not alter ego, but Sam's considered, I am also a person who came from Perth. I came to this university in 1987, did my economic and accounting degrees. In fact, the gentleman who first employed my first career job is in the room, sitting over here. I left at the age of 29 to go to the United Nations for 10 years. I came back, Armidale was always good to me. Every time I came back, it was good to me. I left to the Middle East at some point. I came back to work to the university sometime. And now I also brought my family back, property out of town, property in town, business in town. And this is a great place to bring up a family. As John Galletley said, no problem about young people going away and finding the world and bringing that equity back that we talked about. Yes, you get $500,000 after you've lived in Sydney and paid it off. This is a great place. It's to be rewarded. It's to be congratulated. We can do more. And I would like more people to come and stay like you, but I am. He did, and Darren up the back did. There you go. Mr. Slocum here did. I know that Mr. Clark, as I said, my first genuine employer in town when I was 21, moved to South Australia, I believe, and is back. So it happens. This is good. Todd and I need to find a new place to get gentlemen's clothing, so we're hoping in town. And Rob, please, can juries open again? That would be great for Todd and I, because
I thought that was dug up from the pit or something.
I promise not to change the logo.
I was going to mention that I need a dinner suit, and I'm going to have to buy one when I'm in Sydney on Thursday, because you can't buy a suit here anymore. And it's a true story. And yet, before you had multiple choices, but we'll get it back.
We will. Anyway, all right. Well, on that happy note, let's pull up some. I just want to go back to what I said right at the start, and that is thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming along. This community engagement is wonderful. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to more of it. In fact, we all do as councillors. So thank you. Have a cup of tea. Come and collar a councillor if need be, and we can have one-on-one chats. Thanks, guys.